If you compare beer with bratwurst,
and cheese with wine,
or even whiskey
with donuts,
then we think you can pair all of these delicious drinks with
murder,
conspiracies,
missing persons,
and more.
Drink with us as you feed your craving for true crime and creepy stories.
All right. Hello and welcome back. This is Perfectly Paired With podcast, and I am Jason, your co-host, and my lovely wife here, Katie, is the one who's going to give us all the info on these fun stories. So, Katie, what are we talking about today?
February 13th, 2017 was an unseasonably warm day in Delphi, Indiana. A CVS pharmacy technician named Richard Allen had spent that morning visiting his mom in Peru, Indiana. After leaving his mom's home at around 11 a.m., Richard Allen, wearing jeans and a dark-colored Carhartt jacket, found himself walking along an eastern segment of the Delphi Historic Trails. And it is on the Monon High Bridge Trail that Richard's story diverges into two. One story, Richard's version of events, has him walking the trail to the Monon High Bridge. There, he walked out onto the bridge just up to the first platform, where he had plans to watch the fish swimming in Deer Creek 60 feet below. After a while, he turned and walked off the bridge, found a bench where he sat for a bit before heading back to his car. The other version of what Richard Allen did on the Monon High Bridge starts with 4 simple words: "Guys, down the hill," and ends in him viciously murdering 2 teenage girls before leaving their bodies surrounded by leaves and beneath sticks, partially hidden near the water's edge.
Jeez. Fun story.
Yeah.
As promised. Interesting. Well, I thought I knew a little bit about, I thought I had watched a documentary or something on the Delphi murders, and with this recent news that came out, which I don't even know what the news was really, just saw some headlines and it looked a tiny bit into it. I was like, no, I don't know anything about this, but I've heard of the Delphi murders a lot. Like, there's definitely something that has come across my eyeballs at times, but
I don't know. I'm your conduit for true crime, and although this story is very interesting, it definitely wasn't one that gripped me.
Yeah.
Simply because so much of the details at first were not released to the public, so it was kind of hard to sink my teeth into. So I'm not surprised you're unfamiliar with the Delphi case. But as of 2 weeks ago, there was a conviction, and with the trial, lots and lots of details have come out.
Oh, wow.
And this story is crazy.
Well, good. I always like a new story that I have no idea what's going to happen, where we're going to take it. And yeah, sit back and listen. Anyway.
What you going to sip on?
Yeah, that's what I want to get to, is what we're sipping on. So you gave me some ideas to go with. And one, of course, is the location, the state. So between all the clues you gave me, I decided to go with the location first. And then on our second episode of this, I'm going to go with something else that has to do more with a theory, I think is what you said.
Yeah.
So we're drinking your favorite drink.
No.
Whiskey.
Oh, but it's from Indiana. So.
But it's from Indiana, and it's actually a rye. So it'll be different than the bourbons we've had.
But I only like my bread rye. I don't like to drink it.
Yeah, well, this one might be good. Who knows? It's Bulleit rye. So Bulleit.
Oh, I think we've had this.
I don't know if we have.
I feel like we've had Bulleit before.
Oh, we've had Bulleit.
Oh, but you just wait. The fact that it's named Bulleit, chef's kiss.
Perfect.
Connection to the story.
Well, not all Bulleit like their bourbons aren't made in Indiana, but
Oh.
their rye is.
Oh.
And they actually are made out of, I believe they're the biggest distillery in America, maybe the world, called MGP. And the distillery that they make a lot of their ryes out of in Indiana is a 169-year-old distillery. It might even be older now because I don't know when this article's from. Oh, it is older now. It's 2016. So it is 176.
Look at that math.
77.
You all thought you were just listening to a true crime story. You're going to get some math.
Yeah. And I even had it corrected. That's how good I am. But it's made in Lawrenceburg, Indiana. MGP. They make everything from Bulleit, George Dickel, to they actually used to be Seagram. You've probably heard of Seagram 7.
Yeah, of course I've heard of Seagram.
Yeah, that's was
okay.
the main name of this distillery. I think they are based in Kansas, but Bulleit Rye comes from Indiana.
All right.
So figured, if we're going to do a whiskey, why not switch up the type of whiskey? I didn't grab ice.
That's all right.
If you want it, we could pause.
No, it's not going to improve it. I'm fairly confident. My prediction is I'm not going to like it.
Never know.
Well, we'll see.
Your taste buds are changing.
They're getting burnt off. Strong drinks. And that's no tarnishing of this brand, or it's just not my cup of tea.
No, it's your cup of whiskey. It's not bad. It's
like they were like, how do we make whiskey worse? Let's make it with rye.
I'm usually not a big fan of rye whiskey. This one I don't mind so much because it's lighter. Like it
is lighter. It's less of a punch in the throat.
Yeah, and it's also less of a punch of rye in your face, which some rye whiskeys that we've had have just
too
much. It's like
a little bit burnt.
Bread. And I don't like rye bread. And that's usually all I can taste in these whiskeys. This one isn't too bad. It's actually like a light flavor of that rye. The only thing I kind of expected this out of it is that it's not a very flavorful whiskey in general.
Yeah,
it's kind of
tastes like it's been sitting on ice.
Yeah,
a little bit watered.
Yep,
watered down.
That's you took the words out of my brain. It tastes watered down.
Yep,
but it's not bad. For what was this? $30?
Oh,
not too horrible.
Well, a drink from Indiana called Bulleit is perfectly paired with a story from Indiana where a bullet is going to play a very significant and possibly questionable role in the conviction of a man. So Liberty German, who went by Libby, and Abigail Williams, better known by Abby, were best friends. On Sunday, February 12th, 2017, the two girls had a sleepover at Libby's house, where Libby lived with her grandparents, her father, and her older sister, Kelsey. In Indiana, school districts build in snow days, expecting bad weather, and when those snow days aren't used, students actually get bonus days off from school.
That's good.
Monday, February 13th, was one of those days off. When the girls woke at around 10 a.m. that morning, Libby's father made them pancakes, and after eating, Libby and Abby, who were 14 and 13 respectively, were already complaining about being bored. So, after deciding that the weather was nice enough to be outside, they asked Libby's older sister Kelsey to drive them to the Monon High Bridge Trail, where they could go for a hike. The Monon High Bridge was an abandoned railway track that crossed above Deer Creek, and it could be crossed by those who were brave enough to do it. Now, the word hiking may be a bit misleading here for people who live in close proximity to large mountains, and people who have actually hiked. You see, the historic trails of Delphi are flat walking paths that connect downtown Delphi to the more wooded exterior made of forest land. And when I say downtown, that word is also somewhat misleading because in 2017, the population of Delphi was less than 3,000 people.
Jeez. So they aren't hiking to downtown. They're walking to the town.
They're not even walking to the town. These historic trails have the ability to connect to the town, which is here, over to these more rugged trails, which are on the eastern side.
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
So you don't have to walk the entire distance. But if you're thinking a horrific crime taking place in the woods, you're thinking like 30 miles from civilization.
Yeah.
That's not this at all.
Okay.
It actually was pretty close in proximity to where downtown Delphi was.
Gotcha. Okay, that puts it in perspective.
And you can look it up. They have like a whole map of the trail system if you're so inclined. So with 21 pilots playing on the radio, Kelsey drove the girls to the trailhead so the pair of best friends could enjoy the warm winter day. Libby and Abby were dropped off at 1:49 p.m. across from something called Myers Farm. Then, just after 2 p.m., while out on the trail, Abby took and sent 2 different Snapchat photos. One was just of the Monon High Bridge. It's very artsy. And a second one was of Abby walking on the Monon High Bridge. It was also around this same time that Libby captured a video with her cell phone.
Really?
Yes.
I'm looking, is the High Bridge this like, oh yeah.
It's literally like the most eastern part
of
the trail system.
But
yes.
It's like wood.
Yep.
Like wood railroad ties all the way across.
Yeah.
Yeah, it looks sketchy.
60 miles
60
above
miles
the water. Not of the track. It's 60
above
miles.
the water?
Yeah, it crosses this creek.
Oh, I can see the creek down there.
Yeah.
Well, you don't mean 60 miles, right?
Oh, no, not 60 miles.
I'm like looking at this like,
how did I get 60 miles? I think it's 60 feet.
that makes sense.
It's not 60 miles.
The
That's
Gate Bridge
ridiculous.
is 60 miles above the water. That's
why did
pretty
that
high
live in
above
my
water.
head?
I
I think I wrote it in the first paragraph, too. 60 feet. Maybe, yeah, I think it's 60 feet.
Even, I mean, the highest bridge
I'm going to look back
of
and
is
see if
the,
I said 60 feet.
Royal Gorge.
Oh, I did say 60 feet in my second paragraph. I don't know what the heck.
That's funny. We have the Royal Gorge here, which is very high.
Yeah, but it's definitely not 60 feet.
I don't even know if it's a mile.
Considering Denver is a mile high.
Yeah.
Geez, I apologize.
That's all right. 60 feet above the water. And that looks more correct to this picture I'm looking at. But that does look sketchy.
Oh.
No railing.
No, it's...
Oof.
I think it would be terrible. I don't think you could cross it.
I don't think I could.
Your butt would tingle and you wouldn't make it.
I'd end up like crawling.
Yes.
To make it the rest of the way.
Now, at around 3 p.m. that day, Libby's father showed up at the parking lot where he was to pick up both girls. However, the girls were not there waiting for him. So he called Libby's phone to check and see where the girls were, but Libby uncharacteristically did not answer. After a while of waiting to see if the girls would show up, he called other family members to see if they had heard from either Libby or Abby, including Abby's mom, a woman named Anna, who was waiting tables at a local restaurant at the time. After speaking to Libby's dad, she immediately clocked out of work and headed to the trails to look for the girls. The first thing the girls' family members did was to travel the route the girls would have had to have taken if they had chosen to leave the trails early and simply just head home on foot. When that didn't provide any answers for where the girls could be, the police were called and both girls were reported missing. Now, the real concern early on was not that anything malicious had happened to the girls while out on the trail. It actually was a very popular hiking spot. So that wasn't the family's concern. Their real fear was that one of the girls could have gotten injured, and being so close, the other friend refused to leave their side. Now, one thought that never crossed the minds of the girls' family members was that the girls had intentionally run away or were trying to make it out in the woods overnight. For one thing, Libby was extremely afraid of the dark, and she never would have chosen to stay out past sunset.
Huh.
Nearly
How old are the girls?
14 and 13. Nearly 300 community members searched for the girls at night, but at some point the search had to be called off when it got too dark for the safety of the searchers. The official search was planned to continue the next morning, but due to dense fog in the area early on the 14th, the search start was delayed. Finally, at 10 a.m., the search got back underway, and it wouldn't take long till searchers found something. At 12:15 p.m., 2 bodies were discovered in a wooded area near a culvert close to the water's edge. The land where the bodies were found was actually privately owned by a man named Ronald Logan. Now, on the 15th, the bodies were confirmed as Liberty German and Abigail Williams. It was also on the 15th that a steel frame photo of a man walking along the bridge was released. The man was wearing a dark jacket, light-colored jeans. It looked as though he were walking with like his hands in his pockets and perhaps had something on his head like a hat or a hood. Where the photo came from was not disclosed to the public, and the image itself was in extremely low quality. This man, who would eventually be dubbed Bridge Guy, was not identified as a suspect at first. Rather, he was presented to the public as a person of interest, someone who had been on the trail around the same time as the girls, just a guy the police wanted to speak to. Did you look up the picture?
Mm-hmm.
What do you see?
Yeah, everything you said is exactly what it is. Low quality. It almost looks like a picture from a low quality video.
Well, so at first, that's exactly where it came from, but that's not what was reported.
Yeah.
So people were wondering.
If I were to be looking at this, I'd be like, this looks like it's from because 2017, correct?
Yes.
I mean, cameras are not awful, but videos are lower quality generally. So, if somebody took a video and you did a snapshot of that, you'd get something like this, pixelated and all that. But yeah, it does look like he has something on his head. Like, it almost looks like one of those golfer hats. What do you call
Well,
it?
hang on to that. People got really hopeful because they thought maybe it was from a trail camera. And so they were like, this case is going to get solved real quick if they have camera footage.
Right.
But that's not where the picture came from.
Yeah, that's what I figured.
Then, on February 16th, the FBI performed a search of Ronald Logan's entire property, including seizing computers and phones. Now, if you remember, Ronald Logan was the owner of the land where the girls' remains were discovered. But nothing must have come from that search, as Ronald Logan, up until the time of his death in 2020, was never named a suspect. Now, officials released very few details about the circumstances around Abby and Libby's deaths. Investigators never revealed the cause of death for either victim, and no details about the state of their bodies or about the crime scene were released to the public.
Really? Did they at least release kind of a timeline of when they thought they might have been killed?
I mean, sometime between.
Did they release that they had been killed?
Yes, they confirmed their deaths.
But yeah, just confirming their death. I mean,
the FBI went to the girls' school, talked to their friends, tried to pinpoint when that Snapchat picture had been sent out to try to determine after what time they would have been killed.
And the only reason I asked is because I just thought it was kind of weird. These girls are missing. And they called the search off because of darkness, which I get stuck in my, Hollywood world, and the shows I watch, they're always still searching at night, and then fog. But I mean, I know fog in this area of the country is way different than fog we get here, but at the same time, it's like, that's It's fog.
Well, people connected to the case point out that the official search was called off, but they said there were members who showed up who continued to search through the night.
Okay.
Like volunteer police officers or firemen or whatever who didn't stop searching. But there is some interesting things.
Okay.
That make you wonder how many people were actually searching in the area, and it just gets weird. It does, and I can't explain it. Now, what was reported was that there were specific signatures at the scene of the crime that investigators believed could point to the possible identity of the perpetrator or perpetrators. So, to protect the integrity of the investigation, details about those signatures were kept locked down. And when I say signature, it's just like a specific sort of oddity that you wouldn't anticipate at just your run-of-the-mill crime scene that meant something to the person who committed the crime.
Okay.
Now, the next development in the case occurred on February 22nd when an audio clip was released to the public. The words, "down the hill," spoken in a gravelly voice, had been recorded by Libby's phone.
Why would they release that? Like, hoping somebody recognized the voice?
Yes, we're going to talk about it, and I want to play it for you so you can hear it.
Okay.
And then I do want to have a conversation about what was the point behind releasing this.
Yeah. All right. That was it?
That's it. Those 3 words. And they played it on loop so you could hear it multiple times. And then they encouraged you to call in if you recognized that voice.
Oh, weird. It's so fast too. Like, my first thought is that it's clearly, just a snippet taken out of a longer video. And why? So if it's a longer video, what else is said? Why would you just take those 3 tiny words, which is so, it's so fast.
Yes.
It's literally like in the middle of somebody's sentence or at the very end of somebody's sentence. Like other things are being said and then other things are said after it.
I'm going to ask you hang on to that. Because if I go into my take on it, I'm jumping ahead probably like 6 minutes.
Okay.
So just pause on that.
Okay.
Now, it was with that release that investigators connected the bridge guy to those 3 words spoken, implying that there was more to the man in the photo. And the way these pictures and audio clips are presented to the public, honestly, remind me of maybe a B-level movie about like an FBI profiler or a rogue lawman tracking down a terrifying killer, where Indiana State Police Superintendent Doug Carter played that role. He was often at the center of those press conferences where this information was released. He would drop these strange pieces of evidence, more to come, a bad photo, a short audio clip, and then he would say things like, "I'm speaking directly to the killer now, who may be in this room. We believe you are hiding in plain sight, and we know you want to know what we know, and soon you will." And then he'd be like, "Nobody can ask us questions for 2 weeks." And then the press conference would be done. And you're just like, this isn't a TV show. Like, what the heck is happening?
Yeah. Oh, jeez. I mean, I get the strategy behind leaving little detail in a case like this out to the public, because then the suspects you bring in, that's just so much more to work with. Of if they give us these details, we know they know more, or they actually did do it, as opposed to like we've seen a lot of cases where pretty much all the details are out there, but they only leave like 1 or 2 things that they're looking for. Somebody like claiming that they did it, or they know who did it. I mean, I could see the argument for both type of strategies. The releasing of the weird shit. Now you're just kind of fucking around with the public.
I think most people, I mean, he would go into detail like, I know you can't see his face, but I'm confident that if you know this person, you're going to recognize his body. But he's also walking across like this very tall wooded bridge. And I can imagine the way he's carrying his body probably isn't his natural gait. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so then he'd be like, well, if you recognize, this is that superintendent guy. He'd be like, if you recognize the voice, but it doesn't match the picture of the person, just call us anyway. Or if you think you know the picture of the person, but you don't recognize the voice, just call us anyway. And it just seemed very much like, okay, so.
I mean,
and I also know things that I haven't told you that I think is just going to
the audio clip
reinforce what I'm saying.
The audio
right
clip
now.
literally could be, probably 90% of the men in the area over 30 years old.
Yeah.
The picture could be any man over 45 that's not black or Mexican.
Yeah.
Like that's but what's interesting is I didn't think about this before, but he is talking to a town of only 3,000 people.
Or is he?
Well, I mean, as far as the public
he's
goes,
assuming this individual was a member of the Delphi community.
Right. And
not somebody traveling through.
In that case, maybe Tiny, in his mind, he's like, it's not much, but this is such a small community that maybe somebody does know something.
Well, let's see. Let's see if anybody knows anything.
Let's go.
Now, during those early days of the investigation, individuals who had also been out on the trail on the 13th came forward to speak with officials. Only being identified with their initials, because they're underage, or were at the time, RV, BW, and AS, 3 juvenile females who had been out on the trails that day, came forward and described seeing a man who looked almost exactly like Bridge Guy. The girls even recalled saying hi to him, but the man they encountered ignored them. But that's all they could really say. Another woman named Betsy Blairs came forward, and she told police that she passed a man walking on the trails that day. She described a slender, youthful-looking man who had boyish features. She placed this individual to be in their 20s or early 30s, and she also said that he had poofy hair, but no facial hair. Additionally, a woman named Sarah Carbow reported that on that day, at around 3:50 p.m., as she was driving past the trail, she saw someone wearing what she originally described as a tan jacket, walking along the trails, and this person was all muddy. In fact, Richard Allen himself voluntarily went to speak to investigators about being out on the trails that day. Here is what he told officers during his first interview. He had parked at what he mistakenly described as the old Farm Bureau building, but in fact, it was actually like an old Child Protective Service building that had a parking lot where people could park. Richard then told officers that he was on the trails from about noon to 1:30 p.m. He described seeing 3 girls, presumably the 3 juveniles, but he said that he really wasn't paying attention that much because as he watched like a stock tracking app or like a stock ticking app on his phone.
Mm-hmm.
And as he walked, he traveled from the New Freedom Bridge, which is part of the trail system, to the High Bridge. During this interview, he even allowed officials to look at his phone, but they didn't really take data off of it, and nothing immediately came from this interview. In July of 2017, investigators released a composite sketch of who they believed to be the suspect. This sketch depicts an older man with a distinct nose and facial hair, sort of like a goatee. In the drawing, the man is wearing a hat, which is kind of what you alluded to. And if I had to place the age of the composite drawing, I would say at his youngest, the man was in his 40s. Do you want to Google this first composite sketch?
Yeah.
Just do Delphi murder sketch.
Yep. Didn't even have to type in a whole lot.
So that was released in 2017. Now hang on to that.
Huh. And you're talking about the one with the, I forget what they call these hats, but I think of it as like old school golfers.
I was,
like
but
old, like back in the day golfers.
But
they
now
always wore these hats.
We're moving right on to the next sketch. Now, another sketch would be released almost 2 years later, in April of 2019. This sketch depicts someone very different from the original sketch.
Oh, yeah.
In fact, it seems to match the description provided by Betsy Blair when she first spoke to investigators in 2017. Remember, slender, boyish features, poofy hair.
Yeah.
Now, our state police superintendent, Doug Carter, or whoever else in his group, decided to release that second sketch to the public and say that the new sketch becomes who they are looking for, and the first sketch is only secondary to this new younger version. And in fact, investigators even stated that they actually, from the beginning, had both composites. So why did they choose to release one to the public and not the second one until 2 years later when they had both?
My guess is that they aren't getting shit on the first one.
Yes.
And they're like, well, maybe we were wrong, because they're probably convinced it's this first guy, which definitely matches your photo
video
here. And
more.
Whatever video that they've seen, they probably just like that looks like the same guy.
My concern, I get that that's why they did that. My concern was that by choosing just to release one and not the other, they basically took 2 years worth of time that somebody could come forward and say, actually, I saw both those people. Yeah. And both those people were talking at one point.
100%.
And perhaps...
Why not release both of them?
At the same time. And just say,
two people were working together.
Right.
And
right.
You get a hit on... two is better than one. You get a hit on one, and that can lead... You could... All of a sudden, you got breadcrumbs to way more than had you just gone with one.
Now, in addition to the new sketch, officials released another audio clip. This one begins with that gravelly voice again, but now he's saying, guys, down the hill. Do you want to hear it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Another very short add-on to the down the hill, but so why wouldn't you release that clip?
So
you're gonna do a short little down the hill, down the hill, down, like it sounds like it's in the middle of a sentence, and then when you add the guys to it, it's somebody is saying, guys, down the hill, like it's clear that whoever this is talking, which they're convinced is the person that did the murder.
Mm-hmm.
There's two things. One is more than one person were involved. And two is it lays out new kind of theories of what could have happened.
See, and I think they thought from the beginning when he says guys, he's actually talking to Libby and Abby in a very just like general meaning of the term guys. I know we think it connotates masculine. I think they think he's speaking to them, not additional guys with him.
Again,
but we don't know
that
because
can lead to
few
more
details
theories.
Are released.
Like, yeah, right. But at least with that, all of a sudden, it's like, okay, either the person that they think did this, we now have either they're working with other people, and in a sense, it's almost like they're hunting these girls, or he's talking to the girls,
mm-hmm.
and he's essentially captured them and has taken this kind of captors I'm trying to, there's a better way for me to say this, but whatever, um, kind of this authoritative role where he's telling them where to go.
So I have a few things. To be honest, I think when they add the additional guys down the hill, now the person speaking drops in age. So I think they were very intentional by just releasing down the hill with the older sketch to reinforce that it was an older person. And now that they're saying, hey, maybe it isn't, they added the additional guys because it definitely dropped their possible suspect in age, which to me is manipulation of evidence to try to steer the results in one way or the other, which I think is not the job of law enforcement at all.
No, we say that all the time. But what's weird is that usually you only see it when they're honed in on somebody.
And they
like
have
a
nobody.
husband or somebody or a father. It's when the police are like convinced it's just one person. You don't see them being convinced.
It's a phantom man walking on a bridge.
Exactly.
And they exclude evidence of the contrary. I think that was a very interesting choice. I also think that maybe they wanted to release it where this guy's voice was just picked up. So they wanted to encourage him to come in. Like, hey, we just heard your voice. We'd like to ask you some questions. The second you had guys, they're like, nope, this is the person who spoke this to these girls, made them walk down this like embankment and took them down the hill. But despite those additional releases of information, the case remained relatively stagnant. Now, the next big break came in December of 2021 when law enforcement revealed that they discovered a fake online profile that had been communicating with Libby before her death. Using the name Anthony_Shots and sporting a photo of a male model, investigators would tie that online persona to a man named Keegan Klein, who, despite admitting using his profile to get explicit photos of underage girls, was never named a suspect in Libby and Abby's murders.
Did they throw him in jail?
I think he was arrested. He's got quite the mugshot online if you want to see him. But he doesn't have poofy hair. Because I do remember when news coverage of that break came out and people were trying to see if he could possibly be that second sketching. I don't think so.
I just wanted to make sure,
I do think he was arrested.
Right?
Yeah.
He's like, look, I only participate in getting child pornography.
But I didn't kill
I'm
anybody.
Not killing children. So, okay, go on your way.
Yes. Now, there were other investigative avenues being pursued behind the scenes, the details of which were not made available to the public, but which have since been released. And these investigative avenues came from what was discovered at the scene of the crime. First, the cause of death for both girls were wounds to their necks.
This is the first time it's been released? What the cause
It
of death
came
was?
about because of the trial.
Oh, okay.
So this is all info that's
so where we're at in the story, though, nobody knows this.
Nobody knows this, but I need to tell you this for the sake of you understanding where our story is going to go.
I got you.
But as of 2021, nobody knew.
Jeez.
Now, the cause of death for both girls were wounds to their necks, which were inflicted using a serrated edge. Libby's body was discovered lying at the base of a tree. She was naked and covered in blood. Her left arm was extended above her head, and her body had been covered by 3, what was once reported 4, but probably 3 different branches. Major Pat Cicero of the LaPorte County Sheriff's Department would eventually testify that Libby most likely had been killed near a different tree, and it was there, starting off in a standing position, and then eventually kneeling on her knees or crouching down by the tree, she would have bled out. There was a large pool of blood next to that tree that had saturated the ground. And then after she died, her body was dragged over to lie next to Abby's.
So you say wounds to the neck. More than likely, she got her throat.
I'm going to tell you, she had
knees.
multiple stab wounds in her neck. And then bled out And then as she started to lose blood, and he was confident, he didn't actually visit the crime scene. He looked at photos after. I mean, her torso was covered. Her legs were covered, meaning that the blood had to drip down because of gravity.
And I'm guessing autopsy saw like multiple puncture wounds.
Yes.
So it wasn't just like the throat being slashed.
Now, on the tree where Libby is believed to have died, and this is important for our next episode, there was a blood stain wiped onto the bark of the tree. This blood stain almost looked like a letter F, and the blood from the stain was confirmed to belong to Libby, who is our first victim. And they don't know what order they died, but first in terms of how I'm describing it to you. Now, from that tree, Libby was dragged so that it was laying not perpendicular to Abby's body, but in closer proximity. Abby's body was a few feet away and then kind of off up at like an angle. She at one point was most likely naked and then redressed. Now, she was redressed in both her and Libby's bras, and then Libby's, so the number one victim I described, her sweatshirt and jeans were put on Abby's body. There was no blood on these articles of clothing, making some speculate that Abby had to have been bound or unconscious when she was killed, preventing blood from dripping from her neck wound down onto any of the clothes. But no evidence of tape or rope were recovered from the scene. Now, her body too was covered in using 3 branches, and the missing articles of clothing were actually found downstream. Abby suffered a 7-inch long wound to the side of her neck and most likely died a slower death than Libby. Libby suffered 4 or 5 wounds to her neck, which would have cut 3 main vessels. Now, Libby's phone was recovered from beneath her body, and what they found on it became key to developing the theory to the case. While on the Monon High Bridge, Libby began recording Abby walk across the wooden planks. When the 43-second video began, Abby was the only one that could be seen in the scene walking along the bridge. But then, as the scene unfolded, Bridge Guy appeared walking behind her. At one point in the video, which I haven't heard in anything that's been released, investigators believe one of the girls references a gun. And then the 4 fateful words are spoken: "Guys, down the hill." It is after that that Libby's phone records a 20-foot change in elevation, and it is then that the girls are believed to have walked or descended down to their deaths.
Jeez.
And I'm assuming the video was shown at the trial that recently occurred.
Yeah.
But it hasn't been released to the public.
And you got all this information, which is still pretty new, from the actual
I got it from a few places. I got it from court documents, motions that have been filed. Journalists were allowed into the crime scene. They saw crime scene photos and did like real quick renderings or drawings. But lots of it came from motions filed and court proceedings.
I remember you found, was it a police report you were looking for really hard? Or?
No, that
or was
we will talk about.
Okay, we'll get to that.
That is the bulk of what we're going to talk about for our next episode. Cool. Now, between the girls' bodies, investigators recovered, and I'm going to use the best language I can because I'm not super inclined when using guns. They recovered an unspent or an unshot bullet. Now, it became part of the state's theory later that the killer ejected the bullet in some manner from his gun simply to scare the girls. And according to what was presented later in court, the bullet did cycle through the weapon, which doesn't make sense to me, because later they're going to compare it to bullets that came from a weapon and say that the markings are similar enough.
It's the only thing I can
I don't
think
know
of
how.
is if like maybe there's certain markings that can be made as the bullet goes up the I call it a clip. A lot of people say it's not that, but anyway, um, it, yeah, the slide that you put in bullet holds the
Yeah.
bullets, and as the bullets go up, they're sliding against walls, but then it does go into the chamber. So eventually it goes up, and you can clear that from the chamber without firing it by pulling back the slide.
Yep.
And that'll pop out whatever is in there.
So here's what I have since researched, that the specific markings on bullets that they compare come because heat becomes really extreme when a bullet's being shot, and that makes the metal more malleable or soft, and that's why you can get such distinct grooves.
Yeah, it's by the way the bullet
Yeah. But you need that
down.
heat.
Yeah, the bullet actually has to be, like you said, unspent. It has to be spent, and then it has to go down the barrel. And it's a certain. It's like every bullet has a pattern on the way it spins and goes through the barrel. It's just.
But from what I hear, you need that heat,
but you have
to make the metal soft
fire.
enough. Yep.
And that's what I'm
tip
not
of the iceberg.
Getting what they're saying.
Tip of the iceberg.
Right.
Now, Richard Allen went about living his life as a husband, father, and pharmacist technician until a random file clerk noticed a document in the case file related to his original interview back in 2017. And that discovery spurred another look into Richard Allen. On October 13th, 2022, Richard Allen was interviewed again by investigators. From that interview, authorities secured a warrant and his home was searched, and several items were collected: jackets, boots, knives, and firearms, including a Sig Sauer model, which is a .40 caliber. I don't know if I'm saying it right.
No, you are. You said it perfect.
Sig Sauer.
We have our bigger gun is a .40. It's just like that, but a different brand.
Now, investigators compared bullets fired from the Sig Sauer and the recovered unshot bullet, and determined that the bullet dug up from the ground, never actually fired, could be proven to have come from Richard's .40 caliber.
And Richard owned the land, correct?
Nope, that was somebody else who I knew you were going to confuse them, because before Richard Allen's arrest, lots of people pointed to the owner of the land. He was kind of like this seedy jerk of a guy. No, he's the guy who was walking on the bridge, visited his mom that morning, saw three girls saw him. He came forward, said, I was on the bridge. This is what I was wearing. This is what I was doing. And then he just went about his life.
Gotcha. He was the one that said he saw the three girls, that the three girls also, hey, we saw this guy. Yeah.
So in October of 2022, Richard Allen was arrested and charged with 4 counts. He was charged with felony murder of Abigail Williams while attempting to kidnap her. So the charge, and then that caveat, making it a different charge from just murder. Mm-hmm. And then the felony murder of Liberty German, and then counts of murder for knowingly killing both. But instead of being taken into custody and kept in a jail cell, which is normal or routine for individuals waiting for trial who aren't given bail, Richard Allen was actually taken to a maximum security prison for his own safety.
So this case, did it go national real fast?
When the girls went missing, yes. It was huge. And then because of the time in between when they went missing and when the charges were filed, I felt like people lost interest. You had COVID in there. People just kind of lost track.
So your opinion is the maximum prison is a stretch too far.
Oh,
It was not necessary.
I have so many opinions, which we will hold on to because we can't go into it quite yet.
Put a pen in that.
And while Richard Allen was there at this maximum security prison, his mental health deteriorated significantly. I mean, it deteriorated to the point where he would wet down legal documents from his own attorneys and eat them. He is reported to have eaten a Bible. He is said to have eaten his own fecal matter. He refused to sleep. He refused to eat regular food. He even went as far to destroy a tablet, which he could have been using to call and text people outside of prison. And the images of him in prison chronicle this mental deterioration.
And I'm assuming, and sorry if you already said, he's maintaining not guilty.
He is maintaining innocence.
Yeah.
Until, in this almost state of psychosis, Richard Allen confessed to killing both girls. To his wife, which was recorded on a prison phone line, to his mom, to other inmates, and to the guards. In one of these 60 alleged confessions, Richard Allen even says he intended to rape the girls, but there was this weird white van that drove by, and it scared him off of his intended action. In another, he allegedly said he cut the girls' throats with a box cutter and then disposed of the box cutter in a CVS dumpster.
The box cutter kind of makes sense. Because you can... The way the first girl died, from what that one detective thought, how she just dropped down to her knees. It is, like in the movies, you see somebody get their throat slashed, they grab their throat, and then they drop down to the knees. Well, with the box cutter, it'd be really easy just to stab bunch of times real fast, and same thing happens. And same with the other, like 7-inch on the side. Box cutter would do all that, and you could get rid of it real easy, and no one would question. Like, even if they saw a box cutter in a dumpster, I don't think people would even question it, because businesses use box cutters all the time, especially businesses.
Oh, yeah. I had a box cutter when I worked at a
boxes.
Walmart.
Yeah.
I kept it in my pocket.
When I worked for the printing company, we had boxes and boxes and boxes of paper.
Yeah.
You kept I had hundreds of box cutters working there, because eventually the blade would stop it. Stop it,
okay.
Anyway, box cutter makes sense. I got too far on the box cutters.
So here's the thing. There's lots that I think we need to talk about in terms of whether or not it's likely that one man with a box cutter and a gun he clearly is unwilling to use is going to be able to keep two teenage girls submissive enough that he makes them take their clothes off.
What are you saying,
Neither
Katie?
one.
Are you saying that you couldn't take over a whole plane with a box cutter and fly it into a giant tower and have that tower?
I think those are two
down?
completely different stories, because
I'm just
there's
saying,
no
it's a
place
box
to
cutter.
run to on a
It's
plane.
a box cutter.
But I have been a 13, 14-year-old girl. And I think in that scenario, my friend and I'd be like, peace out. You're old. We'll see. No, I'm not taking my clothes off.
Yeah, I mean,
I'm in the woods. Catch me if you can.
But if he has a gun.
That he's shooting the bullets the wrong way out the top, I'd be like, no.
I don't think that's what they...
I'm out of here.
I mean, if anything, maybe he cleared one out of the chamber. I don't know what they meant, but the whole markings on the gun, or on the bullet from the gun. But
no, the second you're telling me to take my clothes off, I'm out ski.
Did they say any of the bullets were spent? Did he shoot any bullets?
No, there were no shot shell casings of this one single bullet.
You're two tiny little girls, and I've seen pictures of these girls. They're tiny little babies, and they see a guy. The guy doesn't even have to have bullets in the the gun for them to probably submit to whatever he tells them to do. I don't know. It's very strange.
He can only kill one at a time.
And that's
so you start hacking away at my friend's throat, I'm out. I am running. I'm gone. Anyway.
You're not going to help your friend?
Not if she's spewing blood out of 4 wounds in her throat. I'll get a tattoo for you. But I'm running.
Yeah,
okay.
for sure.
Now, the state's evidence against Richard Allen outside of those confessions was incredibly weak. There was no DNA evidence.
Hold on. I just wanted to, I totally forgot about the confessions.
Mm-hmm.
He's in maximum security prison. Is he in solitary the whole time as well?
He is not. And I think we need to table what's happening to him in prison for the next one.
Okay. Because
we're going to go into it in the next one.
You can lose your mind in prison.
Well, you just wait. So the evidence at trial was very weak. There was no DNA evidence linking Richard to the crime scene or to either body. There was no murder weapon recovered. And the unspent bullet found being tied to Richard's gun has been basically described by other experts in the industry as complete junk science. Yeah. The phone Richard Allen had in 2017 was not accessible after his arrest. It was 5 years later, and the phone had been discarded by then. So they can't even track when it could have potentially left the trails. The prosecution did call a witness to testify that the voice in the Down the Hill recording did belong to Richard Allen. But according to several experts, that is not normally how voice comparison is done and presented in court. The most compelling evidence that anybody can hope for connecting a recorded voice to a suspect is to say that the suspect's voice can't be excluded. And then they have to call witnesses who are willing to testify saying that they believe the voice in the recording belongs to someone familiar to them. No testimony connecting Richard Allen to the voice in the Down the Hill recording was given, sans this one police officer who says, yep, it's the same voice.
Really?
Yep.
Is there even, I don't know, you see on
No, they don't have software that lays.
They don't actually have that software?
No.
We see it all the time in movies and shows. They're like,
no.
Let me drag this over to this program and put it in. And, let's lay it over. Oh, my goodness. It's the exact same voice. And the program said it was.
No.
There's no program like
That's not how it's done.
Damn it. That's a real disappointment.
Yeah. Well, in terms of his defense, Richard Allen's legal team had their hands basically tied by several orders from the judge, which we will discuss later.
Of course.
What evidence was put forth by the defense involved calling family members to the stand who would testify that other confessions made by Richard Allen while in prison were false. Apparently, while he was confessing to killing Libby and Abby, he was also confessing to molesting his family or his female family members. But these family members got up under oath and said those statements are completely false.
Jeez.
And the confessions he made often included words like, I believe, and I think I could have, which many psychiatrists whom he did talk to say are signs of false confession. Excuse me, I'm getting really amped up about this. False confessions connected to Richard's deteriorating mental health. There was also a hair taken from Abby's finger that did not belong to either of the girls or Richard Allen.
What DNA evidence do we have?
There's none.
Except for this hair?
But they didn't test it because when a defense attorney asked cross-examination questions regarding the hair, the state basically said that they had assumed it just belonged to one of her family members, so further testing was not completed.
All right. So do you have a lot more details for us for this episode?
Let me tell you.
Because I have a couple questions.
Okay. I've got a few. Let me give you the rest of what the defense presented, and then you can ask your questions.
Okay.
Now, the defense also called a woman named Stacy Eldridge. She is a former FBI forensic examiner with a degree in computer information management. First, she testified that the power log connected to Libby's phone was missing, meaning that the final time the phone was shut off was not accessible. The phone last connected to a cell tower on the 13th at 5:44 p.m. But then, pause it. I got my numbers written wrong, and I know they're wrong. Eldridge determined that the phone last connected to a cell tower on the 13th at 5:44 p.m. She testified that Abby's phone at that moment had a not a power cord, a headphone jack plugged into it sometime around 5:44 p.m. And that was when the phone attempted to reconnect to a tower, allowing for a call to come into the phone at 5:45. So let me just recap. The phone, they're assuming, had been turned off at some point, but they don't know because that power log is missing. But no calls or texts came into Libby's phone until right around 5:44 p.m. when it attempted to connect to a tower as a result of this headphone jack getting plugged in, like waking the phone back up. And then at 5:45, a call could come in, like several texts that were sent but didn't come in started popping into the phone.
All right. The power log missing at the end. That's weird.
It is weird.
I wonder how often that happens, which I
don't
wouldn't
know.
think it's often.
What's crazy is they put in this trial this entire chronicling of the phone. Like, this is when the Snapchat picture was taken. This is when the second Snapchat picture. This is when the video was taken. They have it changing in elevation.
Yeah.
And
so
then all of a sudden, nothing is coming into the phone until you have this very strange reading that a headphone jack gets plugged in, making the phone like wake up and try to communicate with towers.
I don't know much about Androids, but I know an Apple phone doesn't just come on because of, back when they did have the headphone jack.
Yeah.
And turn the phone on. Did they consult with any, like the brand of phone? Did they consult with experts?
So one thing that I think
I'm the expert
came about,
and I can't explain this because phones are weird.
So one thing that came about through the course of this trial was this fact that small towns suck at collecting evidence, and like things just weren't noticed until somebody was brought in. They noticed it and it was presented in court. Like, I think, just spoiler alert, the legal battles that are yet to be fought over Richard Allen's conviction are numerous. And I think people are going to come in and be like, how is this coming about? Because nobody noticed until they hired the specialist.
Do you think Richard Allen could possibly be the next Making a Murderer?
You know what? We're going to have to save that for the next conversation because we're getting ahead of ourselves.
All right.
So the headphone jack was then removed at 10:32 p.m., according to this FBI person's analysis. And when presented by the defense, it presumably was inserted into the phone as a way to like silence any calls or texts, but allow whoever had the phone to still access information on it. That's kind of how it was presented. Because if I have my AirPods in, nobody hears my phone ring. And I think that's kind of the idea behind how they presented it in court. Was like somebody wanted to access information on the phone. They didn't want it beeping and booping because people are still out in the woods. I mean, their bodies were a mile from where they were last seen. The fact that they weren't found right away is freaking weird anyway.
If you can't hear my eyes rolling, I'll tell you they are rolling.
But here's what gets really weird.
But then after all that, you're like, let me put this phone under the body so that the authorities can find it.
Anyway,
Okay.
the phone, even after the jack gets taken out at 10:32, comes back to life at 4:33 a.m. and starts receiving text messages again. So that's freaking weird. Or, oh my gosh, what if the phone was taken by the perpetrator, accessed with this headphone jack, but then it would connect to different towers? I don't know.
Yeah.
This whole
Yeah.
cell phone thing presented in court straight face, but you're kind of like, what does any of it mean?
To me, it means illegal tampering.
Oh, maybe you're so ahead of the game. Somebody did find it and tried to see what was on it.
Or this whole thing was done by somebody high up.
Well, under cross-examination, the theory revealed to have many holes because the FBI specialist basically had to say, like, you can have things that trip those kind of messages, like water getting inside of the jack.
Okay, water.
But then I also say, how does it then indicate when it was removed? Like the water got sucked out? The water didn't dry in 5 hours.
I mean, again, I don't know who these experts are that are looking at the phone and what extent they're going to, but Apple can open up your phone when you bring it in and it has issues, and they can say, hey, you got water damage inside.
I love the way
this
you
thing.
assume it's an Apple phone.
No. I'm just saying that they can do that. They can open up the phone and be like, you have water damage. Like your whole warranty, it doesn't work anymore because of this.
Yeah.
Whatever that may be. And they've been able to do that forever. They certainly could have opened up the phone to see if water damage was there.
But I think
Again, and
it had been collected
they could
in
have gone to the
2017.
phone manufacturer and said, hey, we're getting these inconsistencies.
I don't
Can
even think
you
they were
guys
looking
go?
at it. They pulled a video off and were like, dun, dun, dun. We have the killer. This
Yeah.
phone is no good to us anymore.
All right.
Put it in an evidence bag until the defense gets it in discovery 5 years later.
Yeah, there's so much arrogance that just screams at you when you're hearing all the different details of how authorities handled this case. It's more arrogance than anything. It's not. I don't know. I've got my questions
Okay.
for you. Go on.
I'm just going to
I'll
say
ask a couple questions
that
and-
it was basically that the defense presented as evidence, and then the defense rested. And at the end of a 4-week trial, Richard Allen was convicted on all 4 counts on November 11th of this year, which is 2024 for those of you not listening in 2024.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Just happened. Were all the jurors from the
I don't
town?
know. I'm sure they'd have to be from Carroll County, which is the county that Delphi exists in. I
They
think
just
it's
wanted
so.
somebody.
And it wasn't a quick verdict, though. It wasn't. And I will tell you that the defense tried to get a different location to have it tried. There are so many things that this defense filed in terms of motions, again, that we have slotted for our next episode.
All right.
I agree with you, though. I
A
think
few things
they-
off the top of my head for
Go.
everything we've talked about. One is I get the confessions. So one is I get the confessions being used and so heavily I guess leaned on
Yeah.
for a conviction on this. But I want to know what this guy went through in prison, because dudes break. I mean, people break in prison, and this could have been a mental breakdown.
Mm-hmm.
And this could have been I will say whatever the fuck you want me to say to get me out of this hellhole. Because it's a maximum security prison as well. Like, it's not just normal.
Right.
It is, you're amongst the worst of the worst. So, yeah, I think that's a little suspect.
Okay. Put that on our discussion board. What's happening to Richard Allen in prison?
Yeah.
What else do you got?
The other thing is the population of the town. Do you think that played a part of this? Because we've definitely talked about plenty of cases. We've watched, over the years, plenty of things where it's so obvious that a small town just doesn't have what it takes to solve certain type of cases, and they fuck things up.
So
left and
I
right.
don't think anything they messed up was intentional. I think it was a lack of sophistication. And when you add that to the fact that the crime scene is out in this literally like forest land area, I feel like they were already like at a 10 handicap. I don't know. I don't golf. But like, it's like you're already starting off and there's a very low likelihood that you're going to handle this very well.
Yeah.
And so I think you had literally lawmen who didn't know what they were doing, but were just like, can I handle this the way I think it should be handled?
Right.
And I think they missed the mark on some collection of evidence. I think there's this, which we will talk more about next episode, but there is a tree where there is blood smeared on the bark, and it's, yes, they compared it to the DNA of the blood, but did they try to collect any touch DNA that might have been there?
Right.
Or how do you have such a substantial crime scene and yet there's no transfer of DNA from the individual who committed the crimes? And so I think they missed the mark in terms of collecting evidence.
Right.
Now, to many individuals, it seemed like the defense team didn't put up a very good fight. And there might be something to that. When first arrested, Richard Allen's attorneys filed what we call a Frank's motion, which basically is a motion to the judge saying that a police officer, someone in law enforcement, lied in order to get a search warrant. So the warrant itself was a violation of the Fourth Amendment rights of the person whose home is being searched. And as such, anything from the warrant should be considered fruit of the poisonous tree and therefore inadmissible in court. But what the defense added to what should have been a very simple motion is so much more. This Frank's motion, which is 136 pages long and very, very difficult to find online, included allegations that the girls were actually murdered by a group of white nationalist Odinists as some sort of ritual sacrifice, as indicated by the strategic placing of sticks and branches to create rune shapes. And when Richard Allen was sent to that maximum security prison, he was actually being fed directly to two practicing Odinists who also happened to be guards, who basically threatened him and terrified him until he was driven mad. But to tell that story and discuss the other rulings made by the judge that just might have you questioning possible cover-up, you have to listen to our next episode. An episode that won't take you down a rabbit hole, and instead, one that will take you down the hill.